my name is Amrita and this is my booktube, and today I thought I would talk to you about four of my favorite, more recent murder mystery adaptations. Now, all of these are British, which is not a decision that I took consciously, but it turns out the British are the people who really love their murder mysteries and write a lot of them, and I wanted to choose series that would be easy for people who are not particularly into the genre, as well as for people who are really into the genre. And also, I just tend to consume more British murder mystery shows than any other nations, so this is what I've got. First up is Grantchester, which is a very scenic 1950s-ish series that follows the life and career of a hot priest who finds himself living in the middle of a very murdery village. Now, in case you didn't know, pretty much all the villages of England are extremely murdery. Nobody knows why that is. But we can all be thankful because the hot priest is played by James Norton, who should be incredibly white bread, but is actually incredibly hot. There's just something about the period costume, like this particular period costume and the cassock, or whatever it is that you call what Church of England priests wear, that is just perfect for James Norton. I've seen him wear modern clothes and I couldn't be less interested, but my God, the moment he puts on like the vicar's thing, I'm just like, ooh, come to mommy. Sorry, that was creepy. Now, Grantchester is based on the novels of James Runcie, who is the son of, I believe his name is Robert Runcie, who was the former Archbishop of Canterbury. And it's sort of based upon the former Archbishop's career as a young man and a young priest. Not that he was out solving crimes as such, but he lived through a very specific Britain. There was a lot of class upheaval. Times were hard in the wake of the war, and it was just a very sociologically interesting time, which is what James Runcie is really tapping into. Now, the books are actually very different from the series. The series makes certain adjustments and changes to the central storyline of Sidney Chambers, which is the name of our priest. And to be honest, I feel like those changes don't always serve the story well, particularly in the department of romance, where he is just absolutely hung up over this one girl, and that entire plot line, like, I am so tired of it by the time that it comes to an end. And James Norton eventually leaves the series and is replaced by another slightly less hot, I'm sorry to say, priest. But in the original books, that particular relationship ends in a very different way. I haven't read all the books in that series, but the ones where I have read them, he chooses to go in a different direction, which makes the book version of Sidney Chambers considerably smarter. The series is incredibly pretty. I don't just mean the cast, but I mean the cinematography, and it also does a really good job of creating its own identity without seeming derivative. Because if you have an English murder mystery series set in a small village, it's a pretty large genre. So to be able to differentiate yourself and to create a space for yourself, that's a tall order, but I feel like this series really does a good job of it. The murders are very much sociological in feel, it's sort of tied into what Britain is slowly becoming. And it shows the stress lines that the war created and what it means to be, emerging from the 50s into the 60s. And it gets Sidney Chambers to do a bunch of things that you're like, wait, isn't he a priest? I don't think he's supposed to do that. Which actually makes sense because Sidney is always very conflicted about the fact that he is a priest because, he served in the war and he has this past, and he's always at war with himself. And it's an interesting dynamic, especially with the police sergeant who is older and sort of from a different class, and butts heads with Sydney, but also develops this deep friendship with him. I haven't really seen this series after, Sydney Chambers left and the new priest came in, but I think I do like the team behind the work. Next up is Endeavour, which is a prequel to the Inspector Morse series. Now, this was originally written by Colin Dexter and was a very successful show that aired ages ago and was like a big hit, and everybody loved that particular series. And when Sean Evans was cast as the younger version of Inspector Morse, he had some giant shoes to fill. And he doesn't just do it, he nails it. He's beautiful, but he also has an interesting face. He's one of those British actors that have a face that you can really watch. And he's really good at portraying thoughts. By which I mean, not every actor can just sort of hold your attention while he's not doing much except sort of thinking things through. There are some great actors out there who just can't do that moment of stillness that also shows there's an action going on behind the eyes. And Sean Evans just does it so well. And it really works because the original Inspector Morse was also like that. The series is set in Oxford and it has a class element to it, but it's also, again, like Grantchester, about a Britain that is going through a very strong sociological metamorphosis. And Morse himself is sort of trying to figure out where he fits, whether he wants to be in the police, whether any of it is even worth it. And then you can see how he is so smart and he has such integrity and such an ability to piss everyone off around him. And you see the toll that takes upon him and upon his work, and you also see why he grows up to be the man that he becomes in, the earlier series, which is Morse. The murders tend to be a bit more dark and heavy in this one compared to, say, Grantchester, but it's not super heavy and grim. This is not a role that David Tennant would play. And I feel it hits the best of both worlds, if you're not a murder mystery aficionado, then you can kind of see it as a historical series with a bit of murder thrown in, or if you're really into the genre, then it is really engaging and they're pretty good murder mysteries. Next up, I would recommend Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, which is based upon the novels written by Kerry Greenwood. This is a historical series about a woman called Phryne Fisher who comes back to Australia and gets embroiled in a series of murder mysteries that she has to solve. But she doesn't have to solve them, she would like to solve them. Now, there are some significant departures between the book and the series adaptation, mainly in how it handles Phryne's love life. Phryne is a incredibly liberated woman. She is rich, she is smart, and she has this very tragic backstory, but she's not letting it hold her back. Instead, she's using it to power her through life. And she has tons of moxie. Phryne is pretty much an icon for a very specific kind of person, and I am very happy to be one of those people. She's stylish and she won't take no for an answer, and she will get to the truth, and she has so much daring do, and she's just a swashbuckler. I love her. And I love Essie Davis, who plays her in the series. It's just perfect casting. I think they're trying to recast it and make a younger version, and I just don't care for it at all. Bring back Essie. She's marvelous. Now, in the book, Phryne has a relationship with a Chinese man, and that was seen as pretty transgressive for the time because, an interracial relationship between an upper-class white woman and it doesn't matter what class he is, he's still Chinese. And there are problems not just on her end, but also on his end, because his family don't want him to marry a white woman. And so there were a bunch of like really interesting plot points and social commentary contained within that relationship that is sort of bundled into a single episode in the series. And the reason why is because the series is a lot more invested in Phryne's relationship with Inspector Jack. And you know, I would like to pretend like my principles don't allow me to give them a pass for that, but the sad fact of the matter is that Phryne and Jack have just chemistry for days. And when it comes to like, you know, my principles versus my horniness, I guess I am absolute trash because I ship Phryne and Jack. They do sexual tension so well in the series. It is a marvel. So yeah, it's got 1920s style, it's got great actors, it's got a ship that you can jump on and you will want to jump on. I mean, what is there not to like? My last choice is actually a mini-series and it's based on a P.D. James novel. It's called Death Comes to Pemberley, and it is a take on what happens to Darcy and Elizabeth a few years after their marriage, and you know, what if there was a murder mystery involved? I mean, the premise is great, right? Like, who doesn't want to see Darcy and Elizabeth? We all wondered how that marriage would turn out, and the way that James writes it, there are issues. So the central murder in the series is ostensibly committed by Wickham, who continues to be a loathsome reptile. In this particular version, he's played by Matthew Goode, who is fabulous in these roles. Sort of oily and weirdly scrawny, but with like sexual charisma. So you're like, oh yeah, that's why Lydia ran away with him and why Lizzie was interested. But just really a bad man, you know? It's great. And Darcy is played by Matthew Rhys, whom I love. But look, anytime you see Darcy on screen, the ghost of Colin Firth does loom over them. So is he the Darcy? Maybe not. But is he a good Darcy? Yes. So the way Rhys plays him and the way he's written is that Darcy is still a proud man. You know, that doesn't go away. And he's willing to do pretty much anything for the family honor. And he is almost personally offended, and not even almost, he is personally offended that he has to deal with Wickham's foolishness and his problems because his sister-in-law is married to him. And it drives a wedge between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth because, you know, it's one thing to marry your great love and sort of overlook her problematic relations, but then when those problematic relations wash up at your doorstep and you see your name being dragged into scandal, you do tend to be a bit resentful. And so you see the tension in the Darcy marriage between those two. And Elizabeth is played by Anna Maxwell Martin, who again is not the first person that I would have thought of for the character of Lizzie, but she brings a sort of vulnerability to the role, as well as a sort of stately dignity that is perfect. She is absolutely the woman that Elizabeth would have grown to be if she had become the mistress of Pemberley. And you can see the relationship between Matthew Rhys and Anna Maxwell Martin, you know, as Darcy and Elizabeth. And you can see that they have that anger, but they also have that attachment, and they love each other, but they're still struggling all these years after their marriage with the very different personalities and class differences, which make it a very believable tale. And I know a lot of people don't like it. They're like, oh, you know, like it's miscast, or they don't like the fact that Darcy didn't change and become a better person, etc., etc. But I feel like it's a really great adaptation. The only thing that pissed me off about this one is that it does a real number on the character of Colonel Fitzwilliam. And I don't see why. Like, there was just no reason why that needed to happen. And also it's played by Tom Ward, who's an actor that I really like. So I was like, why did you do that to Tom Ward? Now I'll always think of him as the mustachioed perv. So that was a little bit upsetting. But apart from that, I think it's just like 3 episodes and it's a mini series, one and done. But it's really great and I would recommend it to people who like Jane Austen novels, but also murder mysteries and historicals. So those are my recommendations for beginners and for aficionados alike. Let me know if you've seen any of these and what you thought of them, or if you have other suggestions. I'm always looking for great murder mysteries. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.